Hello YouTube, I'm Jack Hart, the Musketeer, coming to you with another video. How are you? So, I have had a couple of people on my Facebook page ask about this deck. So this is a deck I've just been playing on Building Network, and it is quite an interesting deck, and it's a deck I've always had close to my heart, but however, with Shadow Spectres, and of course the release of the Raccoon cards, it has had a new lease of life just breathed into it, and I thought I'd dither around with the cards and see what I can do with it. As such, I've created quite an interesting and fun deck. It may not be the most competitive, I've not really tried it too much against top tier decks, but it's just a fun deck, and it's just nice. Plus, it's a much easier and a much more, well, I like to say a much more risk-free deck compared to its previous incarnations, thanks to the Raccoon cards. So for those of you who don't know, this is a Unicore Control deck. For those of you who don't know what a Unicore Control deck, it basically, you control the game with the Fabled Unicore, as its name would suggest. The Fabled Unicore is a level 4 Synchro monster, which has got 2300 attack points, which is the highest for a level 4 Synchro monster, which is very nice. However, its effect is even nicer. While you and your opponent have the same number of cards in hand, you negate all spell, trap, and effect monster effects activated by your opponent and then destroy them. So yes, you are reading that correctly, that is a continuous effect and does not activate. So you can negate pretty much anything as long as you can manipulate your opponent's hand and maintain and discard and manipulate your own. So this is what the Fabled do. They are all about discarding themselves and hand advantage and such, and this is what this deck does. It's a stun deck, it's quite conservative, you have to be I don't know how to say this. You need to be relatively skilled to play this deck, I guess. It's not really an autopilot deck. You need to think through your plays, as much as that does sound quite condescending. But not everything is as it seems in this deck. But before I go into any further detail with that, I'm going to go through the main deck itself and actually tell you what cards are what, and then I'm going to explain why, and then of course how to play the deck and why certain cards are there over certain more conventional choices. So first off, we have the monsters, with 2 copies of Baby Raccoon Bon Boko, and then 3 copies of Baby Raccoon Tan Tan. Next off, we have 3 copies of the Fabled Grimro, 1 Honest, 2 Maxi, 3 copies of the Fabled Cerebral, 2 Fabled Ganesha, and 2 Fabled Nozuchi. For the spells, we have Book of Moon, Dark Hole, Mind Control, and 3 copies of Pot of Duality. And then for the traps, we have Bottomless Trap Hole, Compulsory Evacuation Device, 2 copies of Fiendish Strain, 2 copies of Horn of the Phantom Beast, 3 copies of Phoenix Wing and Blast, 3 copies of Reckless Greed, Solemn Warning, and 3 copies of Wabaku. The extra deck is also very important, so I'm going to go through that as well. We have a Catasta, Ancient Sacred Wyvern, Armory Arm, Black Rose Dragon, Fabled Dragon, HDS Psyhemoth, Stardust Dragon, the Fabled Kudabi, 3 copies of the Fabled Unicorn, 1 copy of Gachi Gachi Kentetsu, 1 copy of Herald of Pure Light, and 2 copies of number 64, Ronin Raccoon Sandai Yu. So yes, quite an interesting deck, and I'm going to go through this in detail. So for those of you who don't know, Unicore, of course, was a control deck that came out a while ago. It's a dual terminal archetype, so it basically focused on you manipulating your hand and, of course, manipulating your opponent's hand to negate their cards and just will win. You negate enough cards and your opponent loses his advantage, and of course you will then be able to rush short them with lots of synchros and whatever, yada yada yada. However, this, of course, was not a very good deck. It was in no way a competitively liable deck, and this deck isn't necessarily, but this deck is now better because of the new Raccoon cards. Of course, for those of you who don't know what the Raccoon cards do, they basically just summon level 2 beast monsters from the deck. So Pompoko summons one in face down defense position when it is normal summon, and Tantan's effect monster that allows you to summon a level 2 beast type monster from your deck, except himself, which is nice. So both of these cards allow you to summon more cards off them, which is a much better way because they pay for themselves. And was the main problem with Unicore decks in the past is that they relied on stuff like Lockcat and the Fabled Chawa. And the thing is with Lockcat, for those of you who don't know what Lockcat does, it's basically Junk Synchron. It was a level 3 beast monster that allowed you to, when it was normal summoned, summon a level 1 beast monster from your graveyard. So it's basically Junk Synchron. So if you summoned a level 1 tuner from it, you are able to have the conditions to summon your Fabled Unicorn or the Fabled Kudabi, depending on the situation, but mostly the Unicorn. And in previous Unicorn decks, you would choose something like the Fabled Catsif or the Fabled Chawa. Both, of course, are very, very good cards. However, the thing is with that, you summon your copy of Lockcat and your opponent uses Veiler, and you are screwed. Literally, you have such a weak monster, and you have, in most cases, not something you can follow up with. Of course, a similar situation would be like if you Veiled a Junk Synchron in a quick draw deck. However, they have other plays. They could, I don't know, I'm going to summon this, I'm going to discard a monster from my hand to summon quick draw, then a level eater, and then use this and this. They can still make follow-up plays. However, with such a conservative deck like Unicore that relies so heavily on its normal summon and its set, if you do disrupt that initial normal summon, you're screwed. So, the Raccoons allow you to make it a little bit more consistent. So this deck forgoes the using of the odd leveled Fabled monsters that will allow you to summon your Unicorn, and goes for the even numbers, which are a little bit, maybe not as good or not as fast, but still much less risk involved in them. So basically, Pompoko and Tantan, they pay for themselves. Pompoko will search for Tantan. Tantan is the main card in this. When it's flip summoned, you will summon your Cerebral. Tantan plus Cerebral equals Unicore. That is your main way of summoning the Unicore. And of course, it's the main way of searching for Cerebrals directly from the deck. That was the one thing that also the older decks didn't have, is that they actually had to, most in cases, draw into them, or use stuff like Kakads and Maxis and actually rely on other draw methods. Whilst with this, you can just go for Tantan, which of course can be searched with the other Raccoon. So it's much easier, much more reliable way of getting to your conditions. So in the situation though, however, like, okay, I've got a set Tantan and my opponent's going to attack into it, which happens a lot. So you've got stuff like Wabaku. This is why I'm using Wabaku. Your opponent attacks your set Tantan, you flip Wabaku, your thing flips face up, you summon the Cerebral, and you've got the conditions for your Unicore, and they are protected under Wabaku, which is lovely. And of course, Wabaku is a very nice card just generally, because of course it can use in a plethora of situations. It's chainable and can protect you, because most of your monsters are very, very weak, very, very small, they're not that good on their own, and require you to have other monsters on the field for you to really make them any good. So Wabaku's there for that reason. So with this, you're going for Unicore. So you're going to we've got Grimrow here, which allows you to search for your Fabled. Now, in most of the cases, you want to have your Cerebral in the deck. Cerebral is the main card in this deck. However, in the situation where you do draw into Cerebral, you're not completely screwed. It doesn't mean you have one less Unicore you can summon during the draw, because we also use stuff like the Fabled Nazuchi. Now, the Fabled Nazuchi was unheard of in terms of being used in Fabled decks before, because, of course, it has the effect that allows you to discard a Fabled monster, summon it from your hand. When it's special summon in that way, you can special summon a level 2 or lower Fabled monster from your hand. It's 1200 attack for a level 2, which is nice, I guess, but its effect, the reason why it wasn't used is because its secondary effect would basically just facilitate you to, well, overextend in most cases. And that was the main thing with Fabled, is that actually they are very hand-oriented and they focus on discarding themselves from the hand, but they don't really have much ways to replace themselves after they're discarded. They're not very card economic. They're not very economically viable in terms of card advantage. So Nazuchi was kind of looked over, in addition to the fact that, of course, it's got pretty much a identical first effect to the Fabled Charm, which was the level 1 tuner, which was actually, in most cases, much better, much more easier to use than Nazuchi, which, of course, is not a tuner. However, if you do draw your Cerebral, you have a way of summoning a Unicore, which is what the Nazuchi was initially made for. You got your Nazuchi, you discard your Cerebral, summon Nazuchi from hand, you summon the Cerebral from your hand, and you have the condition to summon a level 4 Synchro monster, which of course will be your Unicore. So if you do draw into Cerebrals, do not despair, because you have Nazuchi to back you up, which of course can be searched with Grimrow, which is very nice as well. Next off, we have the Fabled Ganesha. Now, Ganesha used to be a really important card in previous incarnations of the Unicore deck, because of course it was the level 3, and you'd have your level 1 tuners alongside it to summon your Unicore. However, this card is its importance has decreased, but not decreased where you're not using it. I'm only using 2 copies of it, but you really need to use it because, of course, it can't affect when it's discarded. When it's discarded to the graveyard, you summon it, just like Cerebral. So you'll be using it alongside your discarding cards, a la Phoenix Wing and Blast, to be able to maintain your hand size for Unicore, but not, of course, immediately lose out in terms of advantage, which is the main reason why you use this. Okay, I need to get rid of 1 card in my hand so that I can start negating their effects with Unicore. Well, then I can discard it for my Phoenix Wing and Blast, but still have another monster on the field, so I don't have to lose cards to, I don't have to cut off my nose to spite my face or anything like that. I just need to go and get rid of stuff, and then I, of course, can summon it back, which is the reason why you're using Ganesha. Being level 3, of course, is not actually completely out of, it's not the most useful in terms of summoning your Unicore, but it allows you to go for more options as well. Of course, you've got it and Cerebral, and you've got Nizuchi. Nizuchi's, of course, secondary effect allows you to, well, summon it. So basically, you summon him, discard him, and then, of course, you can use a secondary effect to summon that. So that means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can go for a level 7 Synchro right there, which for 3 cards is not the best, but actually, depending on the situation, it may not matter. If you're going to go for a Blackrow's nuke using 3 cards, it may not be the important because you're going to nuke their field. Or if you're going to be trying to go for a game, Ancient Sacred Wyvern is amazing and a fantastic card in this deck, and of course wins games all on its own. So Ganesha's level 3 allows you to, well, it allows you to have more options, and of course it allows you to mean that you can manipulate your hand without, well, shooting yourself in the foot trying to do it. So that's basically the reason why all of these cards are there. And of course we have hand traps. Hand traps, of course, are very important in this deck as well. Not using Veiler because, of course, it's kind of hard to get rid of from your hand at short term because of Unicore, for Unicore anyway. So we've got Maxi, which of course means got rid of from your hand at any point, allows you to get some more advantage, which Fabled really do need in this deck. Plus, if you need to get rid of it, you can do for Unicore, so you don't have to worry at all. Honest, of course, being a card that you will use to protect Unicore as well. So it's just another form of protection for the Unicore once it's actually out on the field. So when it is actually out on the field, you then have your Backrow, your plethora of Backrow options to be able to stop your opponent. So you want to maintain your hand and manipulate your opponent's hand to the point where you can just negate all this stuff and win. So of course we've got the Horn of the Phantom Beast, which you can equip to Unicore to give it more attack points, making it Fate 100, and of course allowing you to draw every time it destroys a monster in battle, which is fantastic. So, in addition to more advantage, so the more cards you have, the more cards you can manipulate, the more cards that you can actually utilise. So more resources, the better. So that's why Horn of the Phantom Beast is in here. It may be based on personal preference, though. Actually, it is kind of one of those cards that is only good if you equip it to Unicore. I mean, it's okay if you equip it to Ganesha, but I mean, in most cases, because this deck is not using stuff like the Fabled Cockatoo, it's got limited uses in this deck. So you're going to want to use this with the Kodabi or the Unicorn. Next off, of course, Phoenix Ring and Blast. This is interchangeable mainly with Geeky Break. I'm using Phoenix Ring and Blast out of preference, but of course you can use whatever you want. It, of course, with a discarding effect, allows you to manipulate your hand and, of course, disrupt your opponent's plays, get rid of problem cards that they have on the field, which, of course, is what Phoenix Ring and Blast does best. But, of course, the main reason why you'll be using this is because it's got the discard effect. So in addition to manipulating your hand for Unicore, you can also facilitate Cerebral and Ganesha, which is lovely, and of course means that actually, oh look, I just summoned the Cerebral from my hand, now I can normal summon this and blah 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 blah. You can basically, it will facilitate some plays, and meaning that actually with these 2 cards you won't absolutely minus yourself out of it, which is awesome. Next off, we've got the Reckless Greed. Now, Reckless Greed is a common thing in Fable, but in this deck it's much more important. Of course, it allows you to draw 2 cards, and of course, since you're going to be manipulating your hand so much, it will be good. So your opponent, most likely, in most cases, will have more cards in their hand than you will, because you will not be because the Fabled are not very good economically with their hand, card advantage wise. So with Reckless Greed, of course, it allows you to get some cards in a short term if you need it, and which is good. But in most cases, for example, your opponent's got got 2 more cards in their hand than you, and you've got to face down Reckless, and you've got a Unicorn in hand. That is fantastic, because basically what it means is that your opponent thinks that they can go through their plays and be safe, but you can activate Reckless Greed, not only get 2 cards, but it then means that you'll have the equal number of cards in your hand and your opponent, which means Unicorn will be able to negate their stuff. So you can negate their stuff and surprise your opponent by doing that, in addition to it being chainable, which is its main utility. But in most cases, you'll use it for drawing. But of course, it does have the utility of being able to manipulate your hand on and surprise your opponent, which is fantastic. But yeah, let's go to the extra deck. So of course we're talking a lot about Unicore, and it is the main win condition, but we do have other options this deck can go for, as all the other options you can go for synchro wise, with Reagan being a level 5 that you can use with Ganesha and Nizuchi. Reagan, of course, allowing you to draw a couple of cards, which is quite nice. Of course, you have the Ancient Sacred Wyvern, which is fantastic and wins games all on its own, of course requiring a light monster, which is also great. And for those occasions where you can't really manipulate, or if you're not in a really good position to summon a Unicorn or manipulate each other's hands, then you've got Kodabi, which of course has an effect that if you have no cards in your hand, it can't be destroyed by battle or card effects. So if you have the grind game, you can just summon a Kodabi and sit on it and just keep on setting cards and getting rid of cards from your hand so they can't even destroy it. And of course, this equipped with Horn of the Phantom Beast means you can of course gain back some momentum, and you can draw back and claw back at a duel if you're in a tough spot. So Kodabi is a very good card in this deck, and I do see people not use it in their Unicore decks, and it is a travesty that they don't do that. We also have, of course, the Exeasers. Of course, that's what the Raccoons are really mainly there for. And of course, we have number 64, Ronin Raccoon Sandayu, representing, which allows you to summon tokens, which of course get attack points based on the highest attack point monster on the field, which means you actually get some form of removal, which is fantastic. And of course, it can protect itself, and it's just a very, very good card. Of course, not utilized to its fullest potential in this kind of deck, but it is a fantastic option that this deck can go into. We've got Herald of Pure Light as well, simply so you can get cards back from your graveyard. Mainly Cerebral, because once you've run out of Cerebral, you're screwed. No Monster Reborn in this deck, remember. So this allows you to recycle stuff like that. Gachi, just because it's the best rank 2 in the game. And yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. So if you have any interesting thoughts, or if you want to talk about this deck or any ideas, do say so in the comments down below, or as a video response. I really would like to hear from you. But that's pretty much it. I'm going to go play this deck. This is so much fun. I love this deck so much. And of course, if you have any questions, do ask me. But I'm Jack Clark, the Eagle Musketeer. More videos coming out to you soon. And until then, goodbye.